I want to talk a little bit about freedom, right?
Okay.
Because I think, my spirit has been unlocked this year, not just because of COVID-19, but COVID-19 sparked a lot of things because it allowed me to sit still and look around and see that all of the things that I talk about on these airways we could have without asking anybody for anything. And when that light bulb moment came on, I was like, why are we begging people for equality and equity when we are equal and in many cases beyond equitable? Talk to me about you and the ability to move around the world the way you do, Bill Perkins.
Well, I mean, I am lucky to be further down the generations removed from slavery and Jim Crow, et cetera, right? So my life, I live a life from the benefit of other people enduring, right? They just endured some shit. Excuse me, this is a radio, sorry. But they endured some stuff, right? And they survived, and they went through a lot of things. And a lot of that history of that endurance and the things they went through is it's hidden in plain sight. And I want to talk about that. The people, there are not that many records of slave diaries or what was going on. We have to look at other data sources to try and find out what exactly were they enduring and what were they trying to do. How did they move around? How did they get freedom? And one of the things I've been working on and using AI, machine learning, and tech is to look at runaway slave ads in the newspapers of the time, use machine learning because it's, you can't go through all these newspapers to ingest that information, annotate that information, and then pull the story that's being told year after year of the true freedom fighters, the true freedom runners, these people who ran for their lives against all odds in a place they didn't know. Getting caught meant horrible consequences, right? But they took that chance with their lives and they ran for freedom whenever they heard of a spot they can go to or thought of a place they can go to. And I thought that needs to be known and celebrated and all that type of stuff. But I'll pause right there because you probably have some questions, and then we can talk about freedom.
No, I'm smiling because I'm going to be transparent. I saw you were coming back on. I have no memory of why, right? Because my memory sucks. It just really does, which is why I don't lie. Because I said it. I probably did say it. I don't remember. I said it. So when I saw you were coming on today, I was like, I could always talk to Bill Perkins because he's smart and he's dope and he's done some things. I did not know that this was part of your conversation today. So to start off me talking about freedom, I just know I'm here doing the thing I'm supposed to do. It is sanctioned by the divine. And so you keep talking, brother, because I'm not going to get in the way.
Okay. Well, so what I did is, there's this project called Freedom on the Move. Cornell and a couple of universities, they digitized some slave ads. And it's kind of a teaching thing to the public to have people come read them and then transcribe them, right? Because they're written in various funny fonts of the early, 17th, 18th century, right? And get people to transcribe them. I'm impatient AF. And so I was like, look, we use a lot of technology inside my shop for my day job, right? Perhaps we can use machine learning and crowdsource correction and aggregation, all the techniques we use to take an image and learn whether or not a Walmart parking lot is full with customers or not, right? Just so we can trade the stock. Let's apply this to what's going on here to see what information is in there. And so I'll just give you a summary. So we would take the ads, we Google Vision API, that's free. Google's great. Google has half the homework answers out there if you're willing to try it. Use that to scan these ads, right? Hoover them in. Machine gets them, got them. Now, obviously, there's going to be transcription errors, right? So then we use Amazon MTurk. And what is Amazon MTurk? You pay something like 5 cents, 10 cents a job, 5 cents, 10 cents a job, but a lot of jobs. So it's small, human, repeatable tasks you can put out there, put on a bulletin board, and people will take the job or not take the job. And so what they did was they took about 2,000 ads and corrected them. We feed them back into the AI machine. AI machine goes, got it, buddy. This is what this means. Boom, I got it, right? Everything's cleaned up. So now all the ads are transcribed perfectly, ready for the next step. So now the machine's just taking stuff in like basically old English and funny ad newspapers and stuff you can barely read and put them into blocks of text. Now the machine needs to learn what the hell does that mean. So we wrote a program to call annotated, meaning when it says 5 foot 10 inches, or it means that's a height field, or this is a light skinned, dark skin, whatever. This is a feature field, a skin field. Then there's a scar. These a lot of them, they identify marks. So like in these ads, slave owners didn't want to put this information out there. But when your property's on the run, you got to put this information out there, right? So you're picking up things like light skin, like how'd they get light skin? I thought they were from Africa. You know what I mean? How'd they get that scar, right? Like, so all this information is buried in this ad, some interesting facts. And so we built the machine to annotate it. They annotate a couple of ads. We feed it to AI. AI goes, got it, buddy. I now know how to annotate. Just feed me. Now we're just looking for scans and feeding ads. So right now we've ingested 55,576 runaway ads.
Wow.
But that's not even close to being done yet. And from Legacy of Slavery in Maryland, Virginia Geography of Slavery, Parker, Bly, Winley version 2, all these different books of old newspapers, right, trying to go through them. We've also geo-mapped where that newspaper was. So we know on a map, we have a map, and it points, these are all the points of the newspapers that we got, right? And then from those 55,000 ads, we have 41,672 unique runaway events. That's because certain ads, we run it 3 times or 2 times or whatever. And these range from the year 1704 to 1865. So with all that computing power and annotation, we're pulling name, age, gender, height, weight, skin tone, occupation, rewards, enslaver, identifying marks, suspected destination, runaway dates, whether they had relatives. There's a story buried in there, right? Like if you were a researcher prior, right, you're going to write a book on runaway slavery. You go to a library, you maybe read a couple of ads, you have a thesis, right? But here, what we're trying to do is get every single ad that there is a record of, so that we have data and pull it out. And, there's some interesting findings, right? 85% of the runaways were male. The median age of a runaway was 25. And I'm just pulling out a couple stats. The most common runaway month was July. Subsequently, the most common month for a capture was September. Rewards for males were on average 30% higher than rewards for females. Almost 60% of the runaway attempts occurred at night. In general, 15 to 20-year-olds commanded the highest rewards of any group. 0 to 14 was the lowest. And the most common listed occupation for a runaway was carpenter. Now, I have another sheet that has rewards over time. I can see the inflation and what they were paying. I can see dates by latitude, when they ran, et cetera, suspected location. So there's a lot of information that, like, I'm just a data want to know what the hell's happening now guy, right? I had to go back to a historian and go, hey, man, why was there this spike of runaways in 1793? Like, why, what's the spike? And they're like, because I didn't pay attention too much in history class. You know what I mean? And we're not taught this history. This subject is a long period history. It's not, it's like 2 or 3 pages, right? You don't get the full story. They're like, oh, yeah, Canada outlawed slavery over 3 years, whatever. That news would have trickled down, and then people make a run for it, right? Or this border state outlawed slavery. Or that was when the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, and this state went free, so then you're going to see a spike in this area going this way, right? And so
with no technology, Bill Perkins, no technology, no telephone, no email, no nothing. People got information, and then people, as you said, who come on boats, not from here, figured out how to leave to go because everybody wants to be free. Everybody should want to be free.
It's incredible. And it's, one of the things that, the number one occupation you see in these ads is carpenter or cooper, which is a barrel maker, these skilled occupations. One thing that's interesting about it is, one, is that that's probably how information is getting back to the plantation, right? Because these people go over to so-and-so's farm, build a barrel or do whatever. They're out there mixing it up with people in the ports coming out, learning about the world around them, because you wouldn't know where to run south. You might run further south. You don't know where to go, right? So and two, the fact that for that time period, the carpenters and the barrel makers, that's the top of the top of the top of the line, right? You got a great job, kind of easy. You know what I mean? Like, you're learning skills, you're in it. They still ran. Yeah. You know what I mean? And my sister pointed out, she's amazing that, like, having a skill set back then, even then, afforded you more opportunity to get the hell out of Dodge. You know what I mean? Like, because you're going to interact with people and they're going to pass information and you're going to be, know the roads and start, basically the spy, right, of getting it going on. And in response to that, which is a topic of conversation, which you were talking about the police, is that they started building these police forces to catch slaves because it was rampant. People, the true freedom freedom is contagious and everybody wants it. And so people were running, and they had to build these police forces to try and catch slaves, and they had spies and all kinds. I mean, it was horrible. It was this horrible scenario where people are running, and you have these armed vigilantes and newly formed police departments specifically designed to catch runaway slaves, trying to catch you. There's this story that's in plain sight that wasn't told because there weren't many books or topics written about it at the time, right? But the evilness betrays them in their ads trying to get their property back, right? In these records, and this field that I stumbled onto because I didn't know it existed, but this nascent field called digital humanities, I think is going to expose it and help re-examine and look a little closer, not from an anecdote standpoint or one story, but the reams of data that's already exists in newspapers and records that are out there, right? It's as if I went into an old closet with a flashlight and, you look a little bit, people go in a little bit and they catch whatever, and I just turn the whole light on the whole room, right? And then I say, oh, wow, look at this room. There's all this information. Now let's get computers and stuff to help organize it so we can make sense of this data because it's overwhelming, right?
This couldn't happen any other time. This could not have happened any other time.
Yeah. And so it's great. I mean, on this field, I think, we believe when we're done, we'll have 200 to 250,000 ads ingested total for that period, and probably 100,000 events, 100 and something thousand events that we know of, right? And then we'll have to go to statisticians and go, okay, because that doesn't represent every single runaway. That just represents the runaways that somebody went and said, I'm going to go put out an ad and, I got to get this person back, right? Because that's just what you see in the paper, right? That's not the universe. And so, I look at this, people are like, well, why are you doing this? I says, well, you got to know. And I look at this as like, these are the human beings we need to celebrate. So my ultimate vision is to commemorate these freedom runners. I call them freedom runners. Like, so one of the ads will have, Jim left from Lafayette and Poydras. Well, I know that street. That's right, New Orleans, right by that casino. Now I want to put little, plaques, stumbling stones in Europe. If you walk around Europe, they have these things called stumbling stones. They honor victims of the Holocaust. So you'll be walking along, you'll look down, and there'll be this metal thing on the street, and it'll say, Ira Azrich, taken by the Nazis, 1942 to so-and-so gas chamber, killed in the gas chamber, age 8, right? Or age whatever. Just kind of history is alive in your face, so you can ask questions like, how did this happen here or whatever. And I would not as like a mean thing, but just like awareness, like, wow, on this soil, this is what happened, and this thing happened. But for me, the runaway slave is like a celebration of freedom that actually transcends race. So like on this day, you know, on February 5th, 1950, at this spot on Lafayette and Poydras, George Smith ran for his life, you know, from so-and-so and so-and-so, blah, 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 Godspeed, hope he made it, you know. And to that extent, I like to have that in the physical world, you know, these monuments to freedom, right, out there, but also in the digital world. And one of the things we did is that, you know, while we're going to the communities and dealing with, you know, GIS mapping and, like, you know, sometimes it's not Lafayette and Poydras, it's Smith Plantation. So we have to go back into the county records and, you know, we're working with people to find these spots to place these markers so people can, you know, be more aware and in touch and celebrate this part of our history. But also digitally, I put up a Twitter account called Tweets from Runaway Slaves, and the handle is I think it's at Runaway Slaves. I'm going to double check that because I don't want to give out bad information. But it's Tweets from Runaway Slaves. You can look it up on Twitter. And the machine goes out, and we post, I think, 4 or 5 runaway slave ads, but we humanize it. We give the history. So from like a first-person artistic interpretation, and it'll say, you know, my name was George. I lived on so-and-so. He was blah, 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 and just tell their story. I ran on this date, you know, whatever it was, right? I hope I'm free. I was a carpenter. I was X. Because these are real, you know, a lot of times when you pull in a lot of data like this, it's just numbers and stats. So I felt like Tweets from Runaway Slaves, you know, brings you a little piece of the story, humanize them. These are real people, real
runaway slaves ads, runaway slave ads, and you have some beautiful pictures of people. I'm about to follow now. Thank you.
Yeah. It's let me just make sure it's.
This is you, right? Runaway slave ads. It's not you.
No, it's from @from_slaves. So you go @from_slaves.
Okay, well, I'm following that too because that's beautiful.
Yeah, follow that too. I mean, this is not. First of all, we have a website. It's password protected for researchers, but we're making everything we've done, even the methodology. We put out a blog on, like, so everybody can repeat this, right? Because this is useful for what I'm doing. I want other people to pursue it, and I'm just a cog in the wheel of helping the understanding of our history and celebrating our history. I'm just one small cog, and I want, you know, my efforts to be able to be replicated and help other people. You can do this in any field, right? Once you digitize and run AI and machine learning, this is Tech Tuesday, you can get information that you never thought you'd be able to compile. But this
is fascinating, man. Fascinating that you're like using technology to be sort of this cultural anthropologist to kind of go back and look at this history like this. When I'm hearing what you're talking about in humanizing these experiences, the fact that like the average age was 25, and the way a 25-year-old would be thinking about his or her freedom or his or her place in the world versus how we sort of are trying now to figure out how to get 25-year-olds engaged in the political process and get 25-year-olds to vote. I mean, Barack Obama was on the Shade Room this week trying to get young black people to vote. That's how serious we are right now. Barack Obama was on the Shade Room trying to implore young black people to vote. What's one of the most interesting stories that you've been able to track for one of these runaways?
Well, so, wow, there's a couple of them. I think the more interesting things is, like, what was better than slavery? So, you know, I kind of alerted some of the people who study this, or African-American history, some of the professors, and we had conference calls on what we're doing. And one of the things, you know, I'm ignorant. I'm just like, hey, here's the data, and here's what we're doing. They're like, this is great. Can you track suspected locations? Because there's DC swamps where slaves used to run around, and they live in the swamps. And they set up a community in swamps. And I was like, wow, it was better to live in the damn swamps than to be, you know what I mean? Like, people would run and form communities in the swamps, or how people were, you know, when they find out information about the Bahamas and you know, the United States of America were the last places to outlaw slavery. So Abaco and the Bahamas and the Caribbean, they started fleeing through Florida, so much so that they put up a lighthouse, okay, to try and catch slaves. And so for me, it's not necessarily one particular person's life, like, wow, this person worked on a steamboat and they got away. And there's a lot of, you know, when you're reading these ads and you're getting the information, and as our people dig a little bit deeper to like humanize their tweet, right? Those are interesting. But what's interesting to me is the aggregate system and these stories, because because I'm delving into this data, I am learning more about the context of what was going on in the world at that time. And to me, it's just like, shit, when I was 25, I'm goofing off. You know what I mean? I'm working, I got a job, but I'm in the club. These guys are like sweating bullets, risking life, risking horrible scars for just unknown opportunity, like really taking big risks, you know, in order for a better life. And it just makes me more grateful that they went through that and other people helped them, and the endurance that they went through, and to where we are now. You know, it makes me have a little bit of context of, wow, I didn't know this is why the police forces were set up. I didn't know about the Fugitive Slave Act in detail, what was going on. You know, all these things that are like coming up.
Seemingly so many people, I mean, our history has never really talked about this in this level of detail either. So I think that that's one of the reasons why it's been so easy for public schools to sort of glaze over slavery, like, you know, like it's sort of some Disney movie that happened in a land far, far away, where people weren't really that unhappy, right? That they could sell the story of, you know, happy folks and singing in fields, where like these were the people who probably had the most freedom and the most access to information, and they still were like, this is so horrific, I'm going to risk whatever modicum of freedom I have for the real thing. Will there be like a database of like the names of the runaway slaves? So I'm thinking that if you take census data, right, of people from that time, you could potentially overlay the names of the runaways. And if your ancestors' census is there, because it's not going to have, you know, on a judge, runaway slave in the census, is that something that could be possible to sort of cross-reference census data with the data that you're creating too?
So I'm gonna answer. I hear like 2 or 3 questions in there. I'm gonna answer all of them because I'm gonna pull some things out. The answer is yes. Like that's the next step, right? Once this data is digitized, it's easy to go like, hey, this guy ran away from North Carolina in 1860. Here's some information that we've got digitized from a receiving center in the north of names, and since we all have the features, age, height, you know, scars. This information may, you know, we can take the machine and match them up, right, and see what's going on. One of the things when we put up our page for the data, they said, hey, have a search tool, because a person that works for me at my hedge fund said, hey, this is the information I have about my ancestor. This is all we know. We know there was injuries, whatever. He searched, pulled it up, instantly got the name. A story of trying to run away, but then the doctor was mad, tried to kill him, tried to disembowel him, survived the disembowelment, whatever. But we think we have the ad associated with this person's relative, you know, that match. Because, you know, you get stuff passed down through the generation of oral history. This is one of the things that, you know, oral history is very important, right, because there wasn't that much written history. But then we're able to take whatever features, or, you know, I'm using feature description that you have, and attach it back and say, this is most likely the person. Matches every single thing you have, you know what I mean, going on. And so we've done that on an individual basis, right? But once we have access to more data and databases, you just teach the machine, and it goes, these are the possible matches. Here we go. Because
it's so amazing what this could do for Black folks who are trying to trace their history, right? Because so much of our history was robbed during the system of slavery and enslavement. And it's also crazy that you run a hedge fund, but there's something that you're doing that's even more interesting than running a hedge fund, Black Guy. I got to say I appreciate that about your story.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's in there because we've dug into a couple, and it's like, oh, they were on this farm, and there's information that may be gone from everywhere else was there. Oh, he had 6 brothers and sisters, maybe running away to his wife who's in this place. That's in the ad, right? May not exist anywhere except for a story your great-grandmother told you about, you know what I mean, about their dad, right? And then here it is in the runaway slave ad, you know, maybe running to his wife who is at so-and-so plantation, et cetera. And so there's a lot in aggregate and also individually to be taken out of this information. You know, digital humanities is going to be the new wave.
We need to have you come back. But before you go, how expensive is AI? If somebody out there is listening, they want to do something similar for something else. What's that process? Because you're not a tech guy. You don't code. You don't know. You know. So is it very expensive? Do we need to have a hedge fund?
No. So I'm fortunate enough to be in a field where I have people working for me that they're already kind of doing these things, right? So the true thing is the AI tools are free, right? But the guy who's going to sit down and he's not free. So if you already have skills or you're a coder and you're coding, and I always recommend people, like, what's the one thing you would have went into had you know this? I've been coding, skill, and algorithm writing. You know what I mean? Those guys rule the world. But I have somebody there, and I can direct them and say, hey, this is what we're working on. This is the project. They're like, it's an honor to work on this project, you know. And then it's just using the online tools and getting it. Our biggest expense is basically getting access to the ad papers and maybe paying the Turks to train the model. But a person who is dedicated, them and their friends, they could do everything I did for nothing. I mean, obviously, I do it the expensive way because I want to get it done fast and I hire a guy and et cetera. But if you got skills in programming, all the tools are free.